I watched the Plow truck barrel down Maple Ridge Drive at 7 in the morning, kicking up a wave of slush that looked like it belonged in an action movie. And I had exactly 3 seconds to realize the driver wasn't slowing down before he obliterated my mailbox like it owed him money. The impact sent splinters of wood flying across my snow-covered lawn. My name, freshly painted just 2 months ago, was now scattered in pieces across the winter landscape. I stood at my kitchen window, coffee mug frozen halfway to my lips, watching the HOA maintenance truck continue down the street without even tapping the brakes. The driver's window was down despite the freezing temperature, and I could hear laughter echoing back toward my house. I set my coffee down hard enough that it sloshed onto the counter and grabbed my coat. By the time I got outside, the truck had turned the corner at the end of the cul-de-sac, but I could still make out the HOA logo on the back panel. My mailbox, which had been standing proud since I moved into this subdivision in Greenfield, Massachusetts 3 years ago, was now lying in a ditch, completely destroyed. The post had snapped clean through. Letters and packages that the mail carrier had delivered yesterday were scattered across the snow, getting wet and ruined. I bent down to gather them up, my breath coming out in angry white puffs in the cold January air. This was the second time in 6 months that someone had damaged my property, and both times it had been connected to the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association. I pulled out my phone and took pictures from every angle. The tire tracks in the slush clearly showed the truck had swerved toward the mailbox rather than away from it. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. My neighbor, Tom Fletcher, came out of his house across the street, wrapping a scarf around his neck. He was a retired police officer who had moved here about the same time I did, and we had bonded over our shared frustration with the HOA's increasingly aggressive tactics. "Let me guess," he called out. "The Plow." "Yeah," driver laughed as he drove away. Tom walked over, his boots crunching in the snow. He examined the wreckage with the practiced eye of someone who had spent 30 years investigating crime scenes. "That's the 3rd mailbox this winter. The Hendersons lost theirs in December, and the Kramers before that." "You think it's intentional?" "I know it is. My wife saw the driver aiming for the Hendersons' mailbox. She called the HOA office, and you want to know what they told her?" I shook my head, already dreading the answer. "They said mailboxes too close to the street are a liability and that homeowners should consider it a warning to move them back." "That's insane. We're all at the regulation distance. I checked before I installed mine." "Doesn't matter to them. You know who's running the show now." I did know. Patricia Mooreland had taken over as HOA president 6 months ago, and in that short time, she had transformed our quiet neighborhood into something resembling a police state. She was the kind of person who measured grass height with a ruler and issued citations for Christmas lights being the wrong shade of white. The kind who drove around with a clipboard and a permanent scowl, looking for any violation she could find. "I need to call the office," I said. Tom snorted. "Good luck with that. But hey, document everything. You might need it later." I went back inside and found the HOA office number, though I practically had it memorized by now. The phone rang 4 times before someone picked up. "Maple Ridge HOA, this is Donna speaking." "Hi, Donna. This is Ryan Irving from 247 Maple Ridge Drive. One of your Plow drivers just destroyed my mailbox, and I need to speak with someone about getting it replaced." There was a pause, then the sound of papers shuffling. "Let me transfer you to Patricia." The hold music was some tinny version of a classical piece I couldn't identify. I waited, watching through my window as Tom took his own pictures of the damage. At least I would have a witness. "This is Patricia Mooreland." Her voice was sharp and nasal, Exactly what you would expect from someone who had probably complained to the manager at every restaurant she had ever visited. "Miss Mooreland, my mailbox was just destroyed by your Plow driver. He was driving recklessly and hit it deliberately. I have photos and a witness. Mr. Irving, isn't it? Let me check something." More paper shuffling. "Yes, I see here that you received a notice 3 weeks ago about mailbox placement." "What notice? I never received anything." "According to our records, it was mailed to your address." The notice stated that all mailboxes must be moved back an additional 2 feet from the curb to comply with new safety regulations. That's ridiculous. There are no such regulations. I checked with the town before I installed it. And even if there were, you can't just destroy property without warning. The notice was the warning, Mr. Irving, and I would watch your tone. The HOA has the authority to remove non-compliant fixtures from common areas. My mailbox isn't in a common area. It's on my property. The easement extends 6 feet from the curb, which is technically HOA jurisdiction according to the revised bylaws passed at last month's meeting. The meeting that was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday when most people were at work. Her voice turned icy. The meeting was properly announced according to Massachusetts state law. If you choose not to participate in community governance, that's your decision. Now, you have 14 days to replace your mailbox in the correct location, or you'll be fined $50 per day for non-compliance. Is there anything else? I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. Yeah, I want the name and number for your insurance company because I'm filing a claim for the damage. The HOA is not liable for damages incurred during snow removal operations. It's in Section 12 of your homeowner agreement. Have a nice day, Mr. Irving." She hung up before I could respond. I stood there staring at my phone, fury building in my chest like a pressure cooker. This woman had essentially given her driver permission to destroy property and was now hiding behind technicalities and manufactured rules. I opened my laptop and started searching through my files for the homeowner agreement I had signed when I bought the house. It took me 20 minutes to find it, and another 30 to read through the dense legal language. Nowhere in Section 12 did it say anything about the HOA not being liable for property damage. In fact, Section 12 was about landscaping requirements. She had lied to my face, confident that I wouldn't bother to check. I called Tom and asked him to come over. When he arrived, I showed him the agreement and explained what Patricia had said. "That's fraud," Tom said simply. "She's deliberately misrepresenting the terms of a legal contract. You could sue. That takes time and money, true, but there might be another way." He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Hey Marcus, it's Tom Fletcher. Yeah, I'm good. Listen, I need a favor. You still doing that metalwork business of yours?" I listened as Tom explained the situation to his friend. By the time he hung up, he was grinning. "Marcus Riley, best welder in Western Massachusetts. He can build you a mailbox that would stop a tank. How much are we talking? For you, probably 500. But trust me, it'll be worth every penny when that Plow comes back." An idea was forming in my mind. It was petty, maybe even vindictive, but after 6 months of Patricia's tyranny and this morning's deliberate destruction of my property, I was past caring about taking the high road. "Can he make it look exactly like a normal mailbox? Wood exterior and everything?" Tom's grin got wider. "Oh, you're evil, I like it. Yeah, he can do that. Then set it up. And tell him I need it done fast. I've got 14 days before the fines start." Tom made another call, and by the end of the conversation, Marcus had agreed to come by that afternoon to take measurements and discuss design. I spent the rest of the morning cleaning up the debris and documenting everything with photos and written notes. I also drove to the hardware store and bought a trail camera, which I mounted on the oak tree in my front yard with a clear view of where the mailbox would be. Marcus showed up at 2, driving a pickup truck that had seen better days but still ran like a dream. He was a broad-shouldered man in his 50s with hands that looked like they could crush concrete and a surprisingly gentle voice. "Tom tells me you need something special," he said, walking around the remains of my mailbox. "I need something that looks exactly like a standard wooden mailbox, but can withstand a plow truck hitting it at speed." Marcus crouched down and examined the broken post. "Your standard mailbox post is a 4x4 piece of wood sunk about 2 feet into the ground. Plow truck hits that, it's going to snap every time. What you want is a steel post, at least 6 inches in diameter, sunk 4 feet down into concrete. Then we wrap it in wood veneer so it looks normal." "What about the mailbox itself?" "Same principle, steel core, wooden exterior. We can even paint it to match your house trim. When that plow hits it, the truck is going to take all the damage." "Is that legal?" Marcus shrugged. "Your mailbox is on your property, right? According to the actual property survey, yes. The HOA claims there's an easement, but I checked the deed and there's nothing about that." "Then you're fine. You have the right to protect your property. Just make sure the mailbox itself meets Postal Service regulations for size and placement. Everything else is fair game." We spent the next hour going over designs and specifications. Marcus sketched out a plan that looked perfect. To anyone driving by, it would look like an ordinary wooden mailbox on a wooden post, but underneath would be steel strong enough to total a truck. "I can have it done in 5 days, Marcus said, "but I'm going to need half up front." "That's fine. How much total?" "$600. That includes installation." I wrote him a check on the spot. Marcus promised to call when it was ready and drove off. Tom came back over once he left. "You know this is going to cause a war, right?" Tom said. "War's already started. I'm just finally fighting back." Over the next few days, I did my research. I filed a formal complaint with the HOA board, knowing it would go nowhere but wanting it on record. I also contacted a lawyer friend from college who specialized in property law. After I explained the situation, he confirmed that the HOA had no legal authority over the easement they were claiming, and that Patricia's statement about liability was completely false. "You could sue them right now for the mailbox damage," he said. "Easy small claims case, you would win." "I want to wait," I said. "I want to see what happens when they hit the new one. Just be careful. If they can prove you built it specifically to damage their vehicle, they might have a case for entrapment or booby trapping. But if I'm just building a sturdy mailbox to protect my mail after repeated damage, that's legitimate, right? As long as it meets postal regulations and isn't designed with the primary purpose of harming someone, you should be fine. But document everything that led to this decision." I spent hours writing out a detailed timeline of every interaction with the HOA, every violation notice, every phone call. I printed out copies of the homeowner agreement with the relevant sections highlighted. I gathered photos of my original mailbox installation showing it met all regulations. By the time I was done, I had a 3-inch binder full of documentation. Marcus called on day 4. "She's ready. I can install tomorrow morning if you want." "How early can you do it?" "I'm up at 5. Want me there at 6? Perfect." I barely slept that night, too excited and anxious about what was coming. At 5:30, I was up making coffee and watching out the window. Marcus arrived right on schedule, his truck loaded with equipment. The mailbox looked perfect, completely indistinguishable from a regular wooden one. The post was wrapped in cedar that matched the original exactly. "No one's going to know the difference," Marcus said as we carried it to the installation site. Not until it's too late anyway. The installation took 2 hours. Marcus dug a hole 4 feet deep and 3 feet across, set the steel post in place, then filled it with concrete. While we waited for that to set, he attached the mailbox to the top. The whole thing was a work of art, seamlessly blending the steel core with the wooden exterior. "That concrete needs 48 hours to cure completely," Marcus said. "But honestly, it's already strong enough. That post isn't going anywhere." I paid him the remaining balance and an extra 100 as a tip. Marcus tried to refuse the tip, but I insisted. "Trust me," I said. "You're going to want to be around when that plow comes back." Marcus laughed. "Tom's already invited me over to watch. Said he's going to set up lawn chairs." After Marcus left, I checked the trail camera to make sure it was recording properly. Everything was working perfectly, with a clear view of the mailbox and the street beyond. Now all I had to do was wait. The wait was shorter than I expected. 2 days later, I woke up to the sound of a plow truck rumbling down the street. It was just past 6 in the morning and fresh snow had fallen overnight, maybe 3 inches worth. I rolled out of bed and went to the window, my heart pounding. The truck was the same one from before. I recognized the dent in the passenger door. As it approached my house, I saw the driver lean out the window slightly, lining up his approach. He was going to hit it again. I grabbed my phone and started recording video through the window. The truck's plow was angled perfectly to clip the mailbox. The driver accelerated slightly as he got closer. The impact was spectacular. The plow blade hit my mailbox with a metallic clang that echoed through the morning air. The truck's front end immediately jerked to the right as the blade caught on the immovable steel post. The driver overcorrected, and the truck slewed sideways in the slush. There was a horrible screech of metal on metal as the plow blade bent and twisted. The truck's passenger side front tire hit the curb hard, and I heard something in the suspension snap. The truck ground to a halt at an angle across the street, smoke or steam rising from under the hood. The driver, a heavy-set man in his 40s wearing an HOA jacket, climbed out and stared at my mailbox in complete disbelief. The mailbox hadn't moved an inch. It didn't even have a scratch. Then he looked at his truck, and his face went pale. The plow blade was bent at a 45-degree angle. The front bumper was crumpled. Fluid was dripping onto the snow from somewhere underneath. The whole front passenger side looked like it had been hit with a giant hammer. I was already outside, my phone still recording. "Morning," I called out cheerfully. The driver spun around. His face went from pale to red in about 2 seconds. "What the hell did you do to your mailbox? Replaced it after your truck destroyed the last one. Why?" "That thing is illegal. You can't build something like that. It's a mailbox. Meets all postal service regulations." "I have the documentation if you would like to see it." Other neighbors were coming out now, drawn by the noise. Tom was on his front porch, barely containing his laughter. The Hendersons from 2 doors down were recording on their phones. Mrs. Kramer, who had lost her mailbox in November, was openly cheering. The driver pulled out his phone and made a call. "Patricia, we got a problem." "Yeah, the Irving place. No, you need to get down here now. The truck's totaled." He hung up and glared at me. "You did this on purpose. You're going to pay for the damage to this truck." "I built a mailbox on my property to receive mail, which is its intended purpose. You drove your truck into it. How is that my fault? You built it to wreck my truck." "I built it to withstand your truck, actually. There's a difference. You destroyed my last mailbox, remember? You laughed about it. I have witnesses." Tom walked over, his phone also out and recording. "That's right. I saw the whole thing last time." He aimed right for it and laughed as he drove away. The driver looked around at all the neighbors filming him and seemed to realize he was cornered. His aggression shifted to something closer to panic. "This is entrapment or something. You can't do this." Entrapment is when law enforcement induces someone to commit a crime. "I'm not law enforcement, and you drove into my mailbox of your own free will. That's just bad driving." Patricia arrived 15 minutes later in a silver BMW that was way too expensive for someone running a small suburban HOA. She got out wearing designer yoga pants and a jacket that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail that made her face look even more pinched than usual. She surveyed the scene with her trademark scowl, taking in the damaged truck, the perfectly intact mailbox, and the crowd of neighbors who were all very clearly on my side. "Everyone go back to your homes," she announced in a voice that expected to be obeyed. "This is HOA business." Nobody moved. Mrs. Kramer actually sat down on her front steps like she was settling in for a show. Patricia's scowl deepened. She marched over to my mailbox and examined it closely, even trying to shake it. The post didn't budge a millimeter. She turned to me with fury in her eyes. "Mr. Irving, this structure is in violation of HOA regulations and municipal codes. You will remove it immediately." "No, it isn't. I had it inspected by the town building department yesterday." That was a lie, but I was confident that if I actually did have it inspected, it would pass. "Would you like to see the permit?" Her mouth opened and closed like a fish. "There's no permit on file." "Then you better check again because I filed it 3 days ago. Everything is completely legal and up to code." The driver, whose name I still didn't know, piped up. "She told me to hit the mailboxes that weren't compliant, said the HOA would cover any damage." Patricia went rigid. "That is not what I said, Greg." So his name was Greg. He looked at her with betrayal written all over his face. "Yeah, it is. You said mailboxes too close to the road were violations and that I should make sure they got moved back. You said it was part of snow removal operations." "I said to be mindful of mailboxes during snow removal. I never told you to deliberately hit them." "You absolutely did." Tom held up his phone. "And my wife recorded your conversation with her after you hit the Hendersons' mailbox. Want me to play it?" The color drained from Patricia's face. Around us, more neighbors were pulling out phones, presumably checking their own recordings and photos from the past few months. "This is absurd," Patricia said, but her voice had lost its commanding edge. "The HOA will not be paying for any damage to the truck. Greg was acting outside his authority." "Like hell I was," Greg shouted. "You told me to do it. This is my personal truck, Patricia. I used it for HOA work because you said the association would cover insurance. Now it's wrecked, and you're trying to hang me out to dry. You should have purchased proper commercial insurance. You said the HOA policy would cover it." They started arguing in earnest, their voices rising until they were practically screaming at each other in the middle of the snow-covered street. I caught Tom's eye and we shared a look. This was going even better than I had hoped. Finally, I cleared my throat loudly. "Excuse me, but I think we need to involve the police at this point." Patricia rounded on me. "The police? This is a civil matter. Greg just admitted that you instructed him to deliberately damage property. That's conspiracy to commit vandalism at minimum, possibly insurance fraud depending on how the HOA policy is structured. And if you falsely claimed the HOA would cover his insurance, that might be fraud too. You have no idea what you're talking about." Actually, I consulted with a lawyer. A property attorney, specifically. He was very interested in this whole situation. So was my insurance company when I told them about my destroyed mailbox. That was partially true. I had talked to my insurance company, and they had been interested, but mostly in whether I wanted to file a claim. They hadn't gotten involved yet. Fine. Patricia pulled out her phone. I'm calling our HOA attorney. Great. While you do that, I'm calling the Greenfield Police Department. I want to file a report for the destruction of my original mailbox. I dialed the non-emergency number and explained the situation to the dispatcher. She said she would send an officer out to take a statement. Patricia was on her own phone, speaking in low, urgent tones to whoever was on the other end. Greg had sat down on the curb, his head in his hands. His truck was still sitting at an angle in the street, leaking fluids onto the snow. A puddle of green antifreeze was spreading slowly from underneath. Officer Jennifer Martinez arrived 20 minutes later in a Greenfield PD cruiser. She was a young officer, probably late 20s, with sharp eyes that took in the whole scene immediately. "Someone want to explain what happened here?" she asked. I gave her the rundown, starting with my original mailbox being destroyed and ending with this morning's incident. Tom corroborated my story and offered to send her his wife's recording of Patricia's conversation. Mrs. Henderson came over with her own photos of her destroyed mailbox. Even old Mr. Larson from the end of the street shuffled over to complain about his mailbox being knocked over last year. Officer Martinez took notes and collected contact information from everyone. When she got to Greg, he looked like he wanted to cry. "I just wanted to make some extra money," he said miserably. "The HOA paid me $200 a storm to plow the streets." Patricia said if I saw any violations, I should handle them during my routes. She said it was more efficient than sending out separate crews. "Did she specifically tell you to hit mailboxes?" Officer Martinez asked. Greg hesitated, looking at Patricia. She was standing by her BMW, her attorney apparently still on the phone. She said mailboxes too close to the road were safety hazards and needed to be removed. She said I should use my discretion during snow removal operations. "That's a yes," Tom said flatly. Officer Martinez finished her notes and walked over to Patricia. I couldn't hear their conversation, but Patricia's expression went from imperious to worried to openly afraid in the span of about 2 minutes. The officer came back and asked to see my documentation. I showed her everything. The photos of my original mailbox installation showing proper placement, the photos of it destroyed, the homeowner agreement showing Patricia had lied about liability, my property survey showing the easement claim was false, and my email chain with the lawyer friend confirming everything was legal. "This is very thorough," Officer Martinez said, sounding impressed. "You're sure you want to press charges?" "For my original mailbox, absolutely. I want it on record that it was deliberately destroyed." "What about today's incident with the truck?" "That's between Greg and the HOA, I think." "I'm just glad my mail will be safe from now on." Officer Martinez smiled slightly. "I bet. Okay, Mr. Irving, I'll file a report for destruction of property. As for the rest of this, I'm recommending that the HOA and all affected homeowners consult with their attorneys. This looks like a civil matter, but if Miss Mooreland did instruct Greg to destroy property, that could be criminal." Patricia overheard that and marched over. "I did no such thing. This is a misunderstanding blown completely out of proportion." "Madam, I have multiple witnesses saying otherwise and at least one recording. You might want to listen to your attorney." "My attorney says you have no grounds to arrest anyone here." "I'm not arresting anyone today. I'm filing a report and recommending people get legal advice." "But if Mr. Irving wants to press charges for his original mailbox, he has every right." Officer Martinez spent another 30 minutes taking statements and photos. By the time she left, half the neighborhood was outside, and everyone was talking about what had happened. Greg had called a tow truck for his vehicle, and Patricia had driven off in her BMW without speaking to anyone. Tom came over as the crowd dispersed. That was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. I almost feel bad for Greg. Don't. He knew what he was doing was wrong, and he did it anyway for $200 a storm. Fair point. Over the next week, things escalated quickly. I received a certified letter from the HOA's attorney claiming my mailbox was a dangerous structure and demanding its removal. I forwarded the letter to my lawyer friend, who drafted a response pointing out that the mailbox was completely legal, properly permitted, and installed after the HOA's contractor had destroyed my original property. The response also mentioned that we were considering a lawsuit for property damage, harassment, and fraudulent misrepresentation of HOA authority. That got their attention. 3 days later, I received another letter, this time from a different attorney. Apparently, the HOA board had fired Patricia and was trying to distance themselves from her actions. The new letter offered to reimburse me for my original mailbox and drop all complaints about the new one in exchange for me agreeing not to sue. I called Tom, Marcus, and my lawyer friend for an impromptu meeting at my house. We sat around my kitchen table going over everything. "They're scared," my lawyer friend Derek said. "They know Patricia acted outside her authority and that they're liable for what she did." "How much should I ask for?" I wanted to know. "Your original mailbox cost what, $100? About that, plus installation. And the new one cost $600, but you only got the new one because the HOA destroyed your original. So you could argue they owe you the difference, plus your time, plus damages for harassment and emotional distress." "I'm not looking to gouge them," I said. "I just want to be made whole." Derek leaned back. "Then ask for full reimbursement of the new mailbox, removal of all citations and fines from your HOA record, and a written apology from the board. Also, make them agree to implement new policies about property damage during maintenance operations." That seems reasonable. It's more than reasonable. It's generous. You could easily win $5,000 to $10,000 in small claims for the harassment alone. Tom spoke up. "What about Greg? Is he going to get in trouble? That's between him and Patricia at this point. If he wants to sue her for fraud or misrepresentation, he can." As it turned out, Greg did exactly that. 2 weeks later, I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that he had filed a lawsuit against Patricia personally, claiming she had promised the HOA would cover his insurance, and then reneged when he got in trouble. He was asking for the cost of his truck repairs plus lost income. Patricia countersued, claiming Greg had acted on his own and damaged her reputation. The whole thing turned into a mess that would probably take years to resolve. Meanwhile, I negotiated with the new HOA board. They were falling over themselves to make things right, clearly terrified of the publicity nightmare if this went public. Within a month, I had a check for $600, a letter stating all citations against my property had been removed, and a written apology signed by all 5 board members. The letter also outlined new policies requiring HOA contractors to carry proper insurance and prohibiting any discretionary removal of property during maintenance operations. Homeowners would receive written notice 30 days before any violation enforcement, and there would be a formal appeal process. It was everything I had asked for and more. I deposited the check and filed all the documents away in my binder, satisfied that justice had been served. But the story didn't end there. About 6 weeks after the incident, I was taking out my trash when I saw Patricia's BMW driving slowly down the street. She pulled up in front of my house and got out. I tensed, wondering if she was going to cause more trouble. She looked different than she had the last time I saw her. Thinner, with dark circles under her eyes. Her expensive clothes looked rumpled, and her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail instead of the severe style she usually wore. "Mr. Irving," she said quietly, "can I talk to you for a minute? If this is about the mailbox situation, you should talk to my lawyer. It's not, I mean it is, but not the way you think." She wrapped her arms around herself, looking uncomfortable. "I just wanted to apologize. Properly, I mean." I set down my trash bag. "Okay." I was out of line, way out of line. The whole thing with the mailboxes, the violations, all of it. I got drunk on power and I made your life and everyone else's life miserable. "Yeah, you did. The HOA fired me, obviously, but my husband also left me. He said he couldn't deal with who I had become, and honestly, I don't blame him. I spent so much time trying to control the neighborhood that I forgot to pay attention to my actual life." I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me wanted to tell her that was exactly what she deserved. But she looked so defeated standing there on my sidewalk that I couldn't quite bring myself to twist the knife. "I'm moving out of Maple Ridge," she continued. "I'm selling the house and moving back to Vermont where my family is. I just wanted to apologize in person before I left. What I did was wrong and I'm sorry." "I appreciate you saying that. Your mailbox is really impressive, by the way. I looked at it on my way in. You can't even tell it's steel." Despite myself, I smiled. "Thanks. It does its job. Better than it should have to." She started to turn away, then stopped. "For what it's worth, I hope the new board does a better job than I did. This is actually a nice neighborhood when it's not being run by someone on a power trip." She got back in her BMW and drove away. I watched her go, feeling oddly deflated. I had wanted her to face consequences, and she had, but seeing her broken like that didn't feel as satisfying as I thought it would. Tom came out of his house as Patricia's car disappeared around the corner. "Was that who I think it was?" "Yeah," she apologized. "Seriously?" "Yeah." "Said she's moving away." Tom whistled. "Damn, I didn't think she had it in her." "Me neither." Life in Maple Ridge settled into a new normal over the next few months. The new HOA board, led by a retired accountant named Frank Morrison, took a much more reasonable approach to neighborhood governance. Violations were still cited, but only for legitimate issues, and homeowners had plenty of time to fix problems before any fines were issued. The neighborhood actually came together in a way it hadn't before. The mailbox incident had shown people that the HOA could be challenged when it overstepped, and that gave everyone a new confidence. Attendance at board meetings increased. People volunteered for committees. The neighborhood newsletter, which Patricia had used as a vehicle for complaints and threats, became a friendly update on community events and local news. My steel mailbox became something of a legend. People driving through the neighborhood would slow down to look at it, having heard the story from someone who lived there. A few other homeowners asked Marcus to build similar ones, and he ended up with a small side business creating reinforced mailboxes. "I should give you commission," Marcus joked when he came by to install the Hendersons' new mailbox. "You're my best marketing." "Just make sure they all look normal," I said. "The surprise is half the fun." Greg, I learned, had settled his lawsuit with Patricia. The terms were confidential, but Tom heard through his contacts that she had paid him enough to cover his truck repairs and lost income from being fired by the HOA. Greg had moved on to a commercial snow removal company where he was apparently doing well and appreciating having proper insurance coverage. The trail camera I had mounted in my tree caught plenty of footage over that winter, but none of it was dramatic. A few deer wandering through my yard. A fox hunting in the snow. The mail carrier giving my mailbox an approving pat every day. That last one made me smile every time I watched it. Spring came, and with it, the annual HOA meeting to elect board members and discuss the neighborhood budget. I attended for the first time in 2 years, curious to see how different things would be. The meeting was held at the community center, a small building at the entrance to the subdivision. About 40 people showed up, which was apparently 3 times the usual attendance. Frank Morrison ran the meeting with calm efficiency, going through the budget line by line and answering questions patiently. When it came time for new business, Mrs. Henderson raised her hand. "I want to thank the board for the new policies about property maintenance. And I especially want to thank Ryan Irving for standing up to the old regime. If he hadn't fought back, we might still be dealing with that nonsense." There was a round of applause that made my ears turn red. Tom, sitting next to me, elbowed me in the ribs and grinned. "I just built a mailbox," I said when the applause died down. "You did more than that," Frank said. "You reminded everyone that homeowners have rights and that the HOA is supposed to serve the community, not rule it. That's important." The rest of the meeting went smoothly. The budget was approved unanimously, and 3 new board members were elected to replace people who were stepping down. As everyone filed out afterward, at least a dozen people stopped to shake my hand or thank me. Tom and I walked back to our houses together in the warm spring evening. The streetlights were coming on, and somewhere nearby someone was grilling dinner. It smelled like normalcy, like a neighborhood that had found its balance again. "You ever think about running for the board?" Tom asked. "God, no. I did my civic duty with the mailbox. That's enough for one lifetime." "Fair enough, but if they ever try to make you take it down, I've got your back." "I know you do." I stopped at my mailbox, the one that had started everything. In the warm evening light, it looked exactly like what it was supposed to be. A simple wooden mailbox on a wooden post, absolutely ordinary in every way, unless you knew what was underneath. I opened it and found the day's mail, a few bills and a catalog. Normal stuff. The mailbox was doing exactly what it was designed to do, protecting my mail from weather and apparently from overzealous HOA contractors. Tom headed to his house, and I walked up my driveway, flipping through the mail. A letter from the town caught my attention. I opened it, expecting a tax bill or some administrative notice. Instead, it was from the building inspector's office. Apparently, in all the chaos, I had never actually filed for a permit for my mailbox. The letter informed me that I needed to apply for a permit within 30 days or face a fine. I laughed out loud. After everything that had happened, after all the drama and conflict and resolutions, I had forgotten the one thing I had claimed to do. The permit I had told Patricia I had filed never actually existed. I went inside and called Derek. "Remember when I said I had a permit for my mailbox?" "Yeah, I forgot to actually file for it." There was a pause, then Derek started laughing. "You're kidding." "Nope, just got a letter from the town." "Well, go file for one. It'll definitely be approved." "Everything is up to code, right?" "According to Marcus, yes." "Then you're fine. Just fill out the paperwork." I spent that evening filling out the permit application. It was surprisingly simple, just basic information about the structure, its dimensions and materials. I attached photos and a letter from Marcus certifying that everything met Postal Service and town requirements. 2 weeks later, I received my permit in the mail. Official, stamped, completely legitimate. I made 3 copies and filed them away. One in my house records, one in my safe, and one in the binder of documentation from the whole mailbox saga. That binder had gotten quite thick. Photos, letters, emails, legal documents, newspaper clippings from the local paper that had run a story about the incident, and now the permit. It was a complete record of one of the strangest chapters of my life. I put the binder on a shelf in my office and tried to move on. But the story wasn't quite done with me yet. In June, I got a call from a producer at a local news station. They were doing a series on HOA overreach and wanted to interview me about my experience. I declined politely, saying I preferred to put the whole thing behind me. In July, a lawyer called asking if I wanted to join a class action lawsuit against HOA management companies for various abuses. I declined that too. In August, Patricia's house finally sold. A young couple moved in with 2 small kids. They seemed nice, and I welcomed them to the neighborhood with a plate of cookies and a warning to read their HOA documents carefully. "Is it true what happened with the previous owner?" the wife asked. Her name was Rachel, and she had a friendly, open face. "Depends on what you heard." "Something about mailboxes and a plow truck." I gave her the short version of the story. By the end, she was laughing. "That's amazing," she said. "We were worried the HOA here would be difficult. We almost didn't buy because the reviews online were terrible. It's better now. Much better. Just make sure you go to the meetings and stay informed about what's going on. The HOA only has as much power as we let them have." Good advice. Thanks. They moved in over the following week, and the neighborhood absorbed them easily. Their kids played in the yard, they waved when they drove past, and they showed up to the community cookout in September. Normal neighbors in a normal neighborhood. Fall came, and with it the first anniversary of the mailbox incident. I didn't make a big deal about it, but Tom insisted on having a few neighbors over for drinks to celebrate. Marcus came, and so did the Hendersons, the Kramers, and a few others who had been affected by Patricia's policies. We sat on Tom's back deck drinking beer and telling stories as the sun set. Someone asked Marcus to explain the engineering behind the mailbox, and he launched into a detailed explanation of load-bearing capacity and force distribution that went way over my head, but sounded impressive. The key was making the post strong enough to withstand the impact without breaking, but allowing enough give that it wouldn't flip the truck, Marcus explained. If it was too rigid, the truck might have actually gone up and over. This way, the force transferred into bending the plow blade instead. "Beautifully done," Tom said, raising his beer. We toasted to indestructible mailboxes and reformed HOAs. As the evening wore on and the conversation drifted to other topics, I found myself thinking about how strange the past year had been. I had bought a house in this neighborhood looking for peace and quiet, a place to settle down after years of apartment living. Instead, I had ended up in the middle of a property rights drama that could have come from a movie, but it had worked out. The neighborhood was better now. The HOA was reasonable. My mail was safe, and I had learned an important lesson about standing up for yourself and not letting petty tyrants go unchallenged. As the party wound down and people started heading home, Tom pulled me aside. "I've got something for you," he said. He went into his house and came back with a framed photo. It was a shot from the morning of the incident, showing Greg's truck at its awkward angle in the street with smoke rising from under the hood, and my mailbox standing perfectly straight and undamaged in the foreground. Tom must have taken it from his porch. "I got it printed and framed at one of those professional places," Tom said. "Thought you might want it for your office." "This is perfect," I said, genuinely touched. Thank you. You made life interesting around here." I hung the photo in my office the next day, right above the shelf where I kept the binder of documentation. Every time I looked at it, I remembered the sound of metal crunching against steel, the look on Greg's face, Patricia's eventual apology, and the satisfaction of knowing I had stood my ground. Winter rolled around again, bringing snow and cold and the inevitable need for plows. The HOA had hired a professional snow removal company this time, one with proper insurance and training. They cleared the streets efficiently without touching a single mailbox. I watched them work from my warm kitchen, drinking coffee and feeling grateful that this winter would be drama-free. The plow truck passed my house, giving my mailbox a wide berth. The driver even gave me a friendly wave. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom. "Boring, right?" I typed back, "Absolutely boring. Perfect." And it was perfect. Boring was good. Boring meant my mailbox stayed standing, my mail stayed dry, and my life stayed peaceful. After everything that had happened, I had a new appreciation for boring. But I also had a new appreciation for that steel post hidden under the wood veneer. It was still there, still strong, still ready if it ever needed to be. A reminder that sometimes the right way to deal with bullies was to build something they couldn't break and let their own actions take them down. Spring arrived again, bringing flowers and warm weather and the annual HOA meeting. I attended, voted to keep Frank Morrison as president, and listened as he announced that neighborhood satisfaction was at an all-time high. Several people had complimented the new approach on social media, and property values had actually increased slightly. "We're becoming known as one of the best-run HOAs in the region," Frank said proudly. "All because we remember that we work for you, not the other way around." More applause. I looked around the room and saw my neighbors, people who had banded together when it mattered, who had stood up to abuse of power, who had built something better from the ashes of Patricia's tyranny. It felt good to be part of that. After the meeting, as I walked home in the warm evening air, I stopped at my mailbox. It looked exactly the same as it had the day Marcus installed it, weathered slightly by time but still solid, still protecting my mail, still standing as a testament to the fact that doing the right thing sometimes meant fighting back. I opened the mailbox and found a single envelope inside. It was addressed to me with no return address. I opened it carefully, wondering if this was going to be another problem. Inside was a short handwritten note. "Thank you for standing up to Patricia. She was making my life hell too, but I was too scared to fight back. You gave me the courage to stand up to unfair authority in other parts of my life. Your mailbox changed more than you know." It was unsigned, but I recognized Mrs. Kramer's handwriting from the neighborhood newsletter she occasionally contributed to. I folded the note and put it in my pocket, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the spring weather. Maybe the mailbox incident had been about more than just protecting my mail. Maybe it had been about showing people that they didn't have to accept being pushed around, that standing up to injustice was possible even in small ways, and that sometimes the best defense was to build something so strong that those who wanted to hurt you ended up hurting themselves instead. I walked up to my house, past the garden I had planted, past the porch where I spent summer evenings reading, past all the small details that made this house my home. A home in a neighborhood that was finally living up to its potential. My mailbox stood behind me, silent and strong, doing its job. And that was exactly as it should be. The years passed quietly after that. The mailbox incident became a story that longtime residents told new neighbors, usually with embellishments that made my mailbox sound like it was made from tank armor and had somehow sent Greg's truck flying through the air. I never corrected them. Let them have their legends. Marcus's reinforced mailbox business took off. He ended up creating a whole line of them, from basic steel core models like mine to elaborate designs with decorative ironwork and LED lighting. He sent me a Christmas card every year with a photo of his latest creation and a note thanking me for the inspiration. Greg actually reached out to me about 3 years after the incident. He was working as a supervisor for the commercial snow removal company and wanted to apologize in person. We met for coffee at a diner in town, and he told me how the whole experience had been a wake-up call for him. I knew what Patricia was asking me to do was wrong, he admitted. But $200, a storm, was good money, and I convinced myself that it wasn't really my responsibility. That if the HOA president said to do it, it must be okay. But you knew better. I did, and I paid for it. But honestly, it was the best thing that could have happened to me. I learned a hard lesson about personal responsibility and not just following orders blindly. Now, I run my crews with safety and ethics as the top priorities. I appreciated his honesty and his willingness to own his mistakes. We parted on good terms, and I heard later that he had become one of the most respected snow removal supervisors in Western Massachusetts, known for his professionalism and integrity. Patricia, I heard through occasional updates from neighbors who kept track of such things, had moved back to Vermont and opened a small bookstore. Apparently, she had gone through therapy and made peace with her need to control everything. Someone who visited the bookstore said she seemed genuinely happy, surrounded by books instead of building codes and bylaw violations. Frank Morrison stayed on as HOA president for 5 years before stepping down to spend more time with his grandchildren. His replacement, a software engineer named Michelle Torres, continued his policies of transparency and fairness. The neighborhood thrived under her leadership, and Maple Ridge became a model for how HOAs should operate. My mailbox never got hit again. It stood through snowstorms, thunderstorms, one particularly bad ice storm that knocked out power for a week, and even a minor fender bender when a teenager backed into the curb and came within inches of striking it. The mailbox remained perfect, unmarked, doing its job day after day, year after year. I still lived in the same house, happy with my quiet life in a neighborhood that had learned to govern itself fairly. My grass was always cut to an acceptable length. My trash cans were never left out past pickup day, and my Christmas lights were always down by January 2nd. Not because I was afraid of citations or fines, but because I was part of a community, and communities worked best when everyone did their part without being forced. On the 10-year anniversary of the mailbox incident, Tom organized a neighborhood party in my honor. I tried to talk him out of it, insisting that it was ancient history and not worth celebrating, but he wouldn't hear it. "You changed this place," he said firmly. "Whether you want to admit it or not, we're celebrating that, so we had a party." Half the neighborhood showed up, including people who had moved in years after the incident but knew the story. Marcus brought one of his premium mailboxes as a gift, though I assured him mine was still working perfectly. The Hendersons' daughter, now a teenager, gave a speech about how the story inspired her social studies project on civic engagement and property rights, which won a regional competition. As I stood in my backyard watching my neighbors laugh and talk and enjoy themselves, I realized Tom was right. Something had changed that winter morning when Greg's truck hit my steel mailbox. Not just for me, but for everyone who lived here. We had learned that authority needed to be questioned, that power needed to be checked, and that ordinary people could make a difference when they stood up for what was right. My mailbox had been a symbol of that resistance, a physical manifestation of the idea that you could protect what was yours if you were willing to fight for it. The party went late into the evening, with stories and laughter flowing freely. Someone asked me to give a speech, and I reluctantly agreed. I didn't set out to be a neighborhood hero, I said, feeling awkward with everyone looking at me. I just wanted my mail to stop getting destroyed, But somewhere along the way, it became about more than that. It became about standing up to someone who was abusing power, about protecting not just my property but everyone's rights. I'm glad I did it, and I'm even more glad that we all came together to make this neighborhood what it is today. So thank you, all of you, for backing me up when it mattered. More applause, more toasts, more warmth. As the party wound down and people started heading home, I walked out to my mailbox one more time. It stood in the glow of the streetlight, looking exactly like a normal mailbox, hiding its strength beneath a veneer of ordinary wood. I opened it, finding it empty except for a spider that had made a small web in one corner. I carefully closed it again, leaving the spider to its work. The mailbox was serving its purpose, providing shelter and security exactly as intended. Tom came up beside me, thinking deep thoughts. Just appreciating this thing, it's been a good mailbox. Best mailbox in Massachusetts, Tom said solemnly. Maybe the whole country. Let's not get carried away. We stood there in comfortable silence, two neighbors who had become friends through shared adversity. Behind us, the party was breaking up, people calling goodbyes and heading to their cars. You know what the best part is? Tom said eventually. Patricia thought she could push people around, thought she could bully everyone into submission. But she couldn't break you, and that broke her whole system. One person standing firm changed everything. With a lot of help from friends, I reminded him. True, but someone had to be first. I thought about that as I headed back to my house. Someone had to be first. In every fight against injustice, whether it was massive social change or just a neighborhood standing up to an overreaching HOA president, someone had to take that first step, had to be willing to say no when everyone else was going along. I had been that person, not because I was brave or special, but because I was stubborn and annoyed and unwilling to let someone destroy my property without consequences. And that had been enough. The next morning, I was out early watering my garden when the mail carrier arrived. She was a woman in her 50s named Diane who had been delivering mail in this neighborhood for 20 years. "Morning, Ryan," she called out. "Your mailbox is still looking good." "Thanks, Diane. Hope it makes your job easier. You have no idea. Used to be we would find mailboxes knocked over or damaged all the time. Had to take the mail back to the post office and try to deliver it later. Now everything stays where it should be. Makes my whole route run smoother. Glad to help." She drove off, and I went back to my watering. It was a beautiful morning, the kind that made you grateful to be alive and to live in a place where neighbors looked out for each other and mailboxes stayed standing. My phone rang. It was Derek, my lawyer friend. "Hey, remember that HOA case we talked about years ago?" Hard to forget. Well, it's become kind of a landmark case, at least in property law circles. I've seen it cited in 3 different legal briefs in the past year. People are using your situation to argue for homeowner rights and limits on HOA authority. You're kidding. Nope. Your mailbox is famous in the Massachusetts legal community. Well, the legal principles around it anyway. I didn't know what to say to that. My simple act of building a stronger mailbox had somehow become part of the legal conversation about property rights and HOA governance. "I just wanted you to know," Derek continued. "What you did mattered. It's helping other people fight similar battles." After we hung up, I sat on my porch steps thinking about the strange path my life had taken, all because of a mailbox. All because I had refused to back down when someone tried to push me around. The steel post was still there, hidden under wood, strong and silent. Ready if it ever needed to be, but content to simply do its job day after day. A guardian standing watch over something as simple and essential as the mail. Maybe that was the real lesson. That defending the small things, the everyday things, the ordinary aspects of life that we took for granted, was just as important as fighting for big, dramatic causes. That the right to have your mail delivered safely was worth protecting, because if you gave up on that, what else would you surrender? I got up and went inside to start my day. Work to do, life to live, a neighborhood to be part of. Behind me, my mailbox stood at its post, doing what it was made to do. And that was exactly enough.